Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of QQ, brought to you by Second Perspective. My name is Paul Weston. Beside me is Noah Cohen, who's drinking tea at the moment. And today we are going to be discussing Foxcatcher. Again, as always, this is going to be full of spoilers, so if you have not seen the film...
Spoiler alert.
Yes, exactly that, with that weird voice he's doing. But, yeah, so if you haven't seen the film, stop this, don't watch it, or if you don't care, then by all means follow us on this journey. Quick recap of the review. Noah gave it a B+, I gave it a B. We both thought the pacing was a bit of an issue, the acting fantastic. Again, synopsis of the film. You guys don't need, you've seen it. So, why don't we go...
Jump right in.
Yeah, jump right in. Do you want to start us off, or do you want me to?
Sure. I'll start us off. Great.
What do you think of the first 10 minutes of the film?
The first 10 minutes, like you said in the review, were extremely economic in the way that they portrayed information. I know... what was the scene when they sit down and... the secretary asks...
Yeah, if it's Mark or if it...
Mark or David.
Is it Dave or David, yeah.
David. Right. Thank you. And that's perfect because it accomplishes, A, we now know that he has a brother, and B, that everyone is expecting his brother, so there's some sort of superiority complex happening there.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. That's kind of interesting because, I guess, he because Mark shows up instead of David, because it also first it foreshadows the whole Mark always being in the shadow of his brother, but also he's getting paid it was $10 to talk to a bunch of kids and show them his Olympic gold medal, and the very next two scenes after that was him eating
ramen.
Two burgers at McDonald's, and the very next scene...
Oof, that was rough.
Yeah, and the next scene is him sitting at a table. I felt like it was dead silent. I'm sure it wasn't, but it felt like it. And him just sitting there for a moment, and then just eating that ramen. And it was, I don't know, I thought it was really powerful.
Cut to one later, with him on his little video game, little Game Boy.
Yeah,
all these moments of Channing Tatum, seeing Channing Tatum wallow in his... what's the word I'm looking for? Inferiority.
Yeah, inferiority.
We're well placed.
Yeah. Well, the thing... And, if the whole film was that sort of efficient and sort of well-structured and well thought out, this film would be so good. But I felt like it just sort of gets not lazy, or maybe I do. I don't know. It doesn't have that same sort of dense storytelling after about minute 15, minute 20. I even really liked the scene between he and his brother, Mark and his brother, and we'll get to this in another point, but a part of this film is it starts with Mark and then it ends with John DuPont shooting David.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, well, dude, you've lost it already if you're...
Which I didn't know going into this. First of all, I already knew it was a true story, but kind of waiting this whole film for whatever is going to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas I liked that feeling, and what I'm getting from you, Paul, is that you kind of wanted to be led a bit more...
Well...
Not wondering what's going to happen, but knowing who it's going to happen to. And really who you want to focus on.
Well...
Which kind of, like I said earlier, the reason this is a true... The fact that this is a true story, for me, makes not the extraneous information usable, because I think there's parts that can and should be cut. However, the, not sure who protagonist is, or... shifting from character moment to different character moment in the absence of the character who we think should be there, a.k.a. Channing Tatum, because we start the movie with him, to me, actually works in this case because it's a true story, and you get kind of it allows you for more of a dip into the whole life of or the whole situation of what's happening here with DuPont, with Dave, and with Mark. Whereas if this wasn't a true story, I just give me one person and allow me to follow them.
I'm gonna rebut all that with saying, were you bored most of the time?
Yeah, I was bored.
There you go. That's sort of my answer to everything. Like, I understand sort of what you're saying, and like ultimately, I think right now my main sort of rule for myself in storytelling is the David Mamet one, where he says like, "There's only one rule: never be boring," right?
Okay, but there were these moments of boredom directly followed by like extremely suspenseful moments.
And if the boring
in the same scene.
Okay, but see, then that theoretically, like, well, I guess what I'm saying is with this film, like, there shouldn't be.
You can't have those suspenseful moments without the boring moments in this film.
See, that's where I partly agree, and like, if there are the boring parts, first of all, it should never actually be boring. Each moment should have interest for the audience, right? There should always, I guess what I'm trying to say is there should always be something happening. Like whether it's one character is trying to betray another character, or another character is trying to do... Sorry.
That's okay. No, that's okay. I interrupted you. I think they're kind of doing that on purpose here in this film. Because
doing what? Sitting around and doing nothing? What were you saying? Well, what I'm saying is like, okay, let's just to sort of clarify what we're arguing about.
To interrupt you again.
Yeah, it's the fact that I ultimately, as a whole, and I feel what this film failed to do is that each moment on screen should be propelling you forward to a particular moment. Nathan, who's usually here with me discussing these films, tends to argue with me about that, saying, it's about the journey and stuff. I still disagree, and I'm sure he and I will have another discussion about that at some point. But I feel like at least having a place where the story needs to go will always ensure that each scene is important and hopefully, if you do your job properly, entertaining. Right? And usually people are going to be bored or disinterested or looking at their phone or something is because it's not the stakes aren't high enough. It's moving too slowly. The information is not being fed quickly enough. It's like, and like, I mean, you could probably see it in sort of like my style, like my film. Like I made a 10-page script and I turned it down into a 5.5, 6 minute movie, and it's just. I feel like with films, especially with Foxcatcher, there was so much time that you and I could look at each other and actually discuss what was going on and then go back to the film and we didn't miss anything, right? You and I together just saw Whiplash, which we won't spoil here, but the whole time, there's very few moments where I was not paying attention to that film.
What I think it is they're both approaching suspense as an emotion or like they want to give suspense as an emotion to the audience in different ways.
But the problem is did you have did you feel suspense?
I definitely did. And like I said, it was suspense immediately preceded by, like, I would be really bored sitting there and then just a quick second later, whether it was all of a sudden there's a gun in frame, things escalate extremely quickly. Like that shot of all of the men, the wrestlers working out in the gym is like, okay, you didn't need to do that shot. If this was Whiplash, we'd probably follow Steve Carell into the room with the gun.
See, I don't know that I agree with you. And like not only that, I don't have a problem with that particular scene. It took like, you need sometimes establishing shots. Yeah, I get it, right? It was what, 10 seconds in the gym of following people? Okay, great. We're in a gym. Everything's normal. You have set something and you've done it economically enough that I know, okay, it's important. Or, sorry, not it's important. Everything is normal. And then he went straight to, I don't know whether he started getting the sniping thing. But, anyways, Steve Carell goes right in frame with the gun.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That is quick enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
But there were, like, as I said in the review, there are a ton of different scenes. Even, like, when David first comes to the Foxcatcher, like, place, land, whatever you want to call it, training ground, where he goes to see his brother, and he goes, no, Mark, you okay? Mark, is everything cool?
Mm-hmm.
Mark, you okay? Great, you want to have that scene? That's fine. But you just had one 5 minutes ago of him calling him, being like, hey, Mark, you okay, buddy? You okay? Yeah. You okay, buddy? And it's just like, I understand setting things up. And, if you want to have it twice, just sort of foreshadow or create the idea that something is building, that's fine.
I kind of assumed it was for us. I mean, okay, first go around, we got their relationship as brothers.
Yeah.
And we also got that we're starting to see the Channing Tatum, Mark's decline as a wrestler and as a
like the cabin
person.
Scene?
Yeah, he
yeah, I'm fine with that scene.
So I think they function in that we're hoping that they're going to function in that, okay, so we're checking up on Mark as a character. We're going to want to follow him this whole time and see him become even further and further fucked up by this DuPont man, which, yeah, that happens. He's in a room, he hits his head against the mirror, eats all the food. We reach that point. And then he's gone. We lose him. Mm. He's out of the story for these little increments of the film where, like, I have to ask where he is. Where's the man I was following? And I kind of see that as a problem. I did love those moments with just... okay, so it's problematic, but it's also... It's not something we're used to, I think. We are used to that the protagonist fall the whole time. But then we kind of can dip in and out.
But the problem for me... Yeah, I just... Like, I'm okay with films dipping in and out and stuff. And, like, there's actually a particular film, and for the love of God, I'm sorry, I can't remember the title. But it's a South Korean film. It's part of the Vengeance series. So, I believe... I might just be throwing all sorts of misinformation out here. I think it's the same guy that directed Old Boy, which, if you haven't seen, fantastic film.
No, it's not.
You don't like Old Boy?
No.
Really? Okay, well, you and I are going to have to discuss that one at some other point. But anyways, with a narrative structure, in this film, they follow one character for about half the film. And... you sympathize with him, you see all the shit happening to him, and you're like, yeah, fight the man, and all sort of stuff, and then, right about the middle point, something starts changing. And you're like, man, the protagonist is not in the film a lot, we're following this other guy, and you're not sure why too often, because at one point, he was sort of the antagonist of the film, and also you start following, he's just sort of just left of the antagonist, and you start following him. And you're like, well, and about three ways through the movie, you realize, holy crap, this guy's my new protagonist. And the antagonist is the protagonist from the beginning. That's fucking interesting. Where you can set up a guy as a protagonist and then make him the antagonist, and you definitely care about both characters, right? Because the protagonist that you follow in the first half does something that's... you understand why this new protagonist is chasing him down and wants to kill him or do something to him, right? Like, I won't spoil too much for that film, but you understand, right? That's really cool structure. I'm not a hater of, like, new structure and stuff like that, but with that film, each and every scene and doing a character swap and switching things out, it all had a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It all led to a
Mm-hmm.
point of that film being like, is vengeance really vengeance? Like, is it just a point of view? Are we all just like murderous, evil people, right? And that's cool. I'm totally cool with going like the point that
Okay,
you're going to is
I
thematic.
really do think this is a true story.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Mm.
You can't make a Whiplash film
Mm.
with a true story.
Um.
Or you're going to be manipulating.
See, and
Truth.
like apparently we're going to talk very little about the film itself, and we're going to talk more about the issues that it arises. But anyways, continue. Because I do think this is interesting.
And for people that knew the story and maybe lived through these events, approaching this film, I can't speak for them, but I feel like it could work. Because going in not knowing this, I was sort of on this ride of a little less guided when we'd go to certain characters, and I wasn't really sure why. And then the end happens. And everything kind of clicked for a moment. As
How did it click for you?
Why I was with DuPont and his mother, or DuPont and the trophy case, when I should have been with Channing Tatum. We needed a bit of an insight into DuPont's character that I didn't know why we were getting the whole time.
So my question to you then is, what, other than getting these two brothers together, what did he do for the climax?
Climax being when he
when he shoots him.
shoots him.
So,
He shoots him?
yeah. What?
That would be the pulling the trigger?
Yeah,
What he
yeah.
did? What do you mean? What did he do?
And then, like, what? No, sorry. I'm saying Mark, if I didn't say it properly.
Gotcha.
What does Mark, what did I say?
Mark didn't do shit for the climax.
So then...
Wasn't even there.
So then, and like, okay, I can... But then
But we
see, that's
finished the film with Mark.
because the director put a bunch of shots there.
Yeah.
And it's just so, it's like, that's... You're telling me that works? And I'm saying that's... That's writing that's not refined yet. And if you, like, okay, that is interesting. I cared about both those characters. And I really, really, really did not want him to shoot David, DuPont. I really don't want him to shoot him. But I'm like, and that moment as itself, it works, right? And that's hard enough as it is to make. Okay, great. I commend that. I admire that. But we spent 45 minutes to an hour doing the relationship of those brothers, and when the climax of him shooting, DuPont shooting the brother, it felt like two different stories, and
It felt like, I think what you said there with the moment worked. I think that applies actually to the whole film. Each moment worked individually because, and that's something, I'm going to keep saying this, but it's a real story. And that is so essential to the arc of it. You have to, I think you really, if you look at this film as just film and pretend it didn't even happen, then this film fails. But except for the beginning, which leads us to believe that it's not going to be a film of just moments that work. It leads us that we're going to follow the underdog brother who is jealous of his older brother and is driven to insanity by a crazy millionaire, which we do go on for a bit, but then they lose it. They lose track.
Yeah.
So it works and it also doesn't. It works in a suspenseful way, I think. That, like, and that's what I was saying earlier, is that you get boredom and suspense nicely placed in the same scene when you're not entirely sure why it's there. You're not sure why we're here.
In a good film, you can have something you're not sure why is there and still be interested.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying this is a bad film, but I'm saying, like, the things that sort of the flaws that it has are...
I was still interested, though. I was interested enough that I could say, okay, I know like I know what's happening and I'm interested, but
Mm.
maybe it's like to the point of uncomfortability where you just start to, if your emotions are going on this like incline of uncomfortability and you've reached it, you reach the top and then you just sort of lose focus for a bit. You need to lose focus on the film itself. You need to take your focus off or you're just going to be so uncomfortable for so long. And like that's why people laugh when something so absurd or tragic could happen is we're unable to actually deal with it.
I guess so. Like, before, at risk of this conversation being a little bit convoluted and all sorts of stuff. Like, my argument is that the story could have been told more clearly, and it could have been it was not executed the best that it could be. It was executed at a B level, not at a level. There are things that this film could have done that, like, if the fact that we need to say, oh, but it's a true story, so we need to cut it some slack, that should never happen. That should never ever happen. That's at least.
But it's not that we're cutting it slack. We're giving it context beyond the film itself, which adds to the film.
And like that's an interesting conversation that we can have at some point about whether, if it's a true story or not, we should give it context, or like use that as context. But I feel like on a filmmaking fundamental storytelling level,
sure,
there are elements that don't work. I've written a bunch of notes here, because like one of the
Paul
things
writes notes. Look at that, he's studious.
Yeah, I write notes because I'll forget them if I don't otherwise. It's like the thing I keep sort of ultimately, like the thing I argue about is I keep saying the film doesn't know whose story it is. So I'm gonna take like 2 or 3 minutes to talk about it. So let me kind of get through my notes quickly, and then you can say I'm wrong in like 10 seconds. But to kind of go on a very basic level, more often than not, there's sort of a belief, a group of people that believe, the climax should answer the question that is asked at the beginning of the film, right? So each film sort of promises you or suggests a question that they're going to promote. And often the person who has the power to answer that question should be your protagonist, right? And if you don't follow that particular character, like, okay, what's the question that we had at the beginning of this film?
That's what I was gonna ask you. Is what did you think the question was?
Basically, my question is,
mine was, is Channing Tatum gonna win? Is he gonna win at the Olympics?
Yeah,
it's a Rocky story.
Yeah, like is he going to win, and is this relationship with DuPont going to go horribly wrong, right?
Which would lead to him winning or losing,
basically.
Because we don't really see DuPont until 15 minutes in.
Yeah, and that's fine, but then we get like that part where all of a sudden, Stephen Carell starts focusing more on David, and like even when he's like, bring you and your brother, then all of a sudden, the film about halfway through takes this turn where it's all of a sudden starts focusing on David and Steve Carell, and then it sort of builds into the final moment where when Steve Carell watches him film, realizes like, okay, he's got this impactful thing on Mark's life, but in that video that the documentary people made, and it had nothing to do with David, he goes with the gun, drives over to his David's house and shoots him. Like, if that is the point of that story, then why are we not following David? Right? And like, I can understand having Mark there, but by having Mark at the beginning, you're promising us all sorts of, or suggesting that we're going to be following all sorts of things with Mark, right? And then when we're not, it starts to feel bloated, or we feel it's like we're confused as to why this is happening, and we become sort of disinterested, right? And like all stories, like I wrote down, like all stories start very basic, right? Like boy meets girl, we've heard that story, and it's only when we start adding particular details that we actually start to get particular characters, and then we start become like the story becomes original. It starts becoming interesting, and we become emotionally invested in these particular characters, right? Like when we start adding details, because we've seen love stories so many times, but it's in these details that we care about these characters. But like what I'm saying is the danger is adding details that don't matter start to make your story bloated and make people like me say it feels like it could have been 30 minutes shorter, right? And that's
matter towards the plot.
Pardon?
Matter
towards the plot, or what you quote unquote promised to the like or suggest to the audience, what like, because the whole point with stories is like you're going, okay, in my first 10-15 minutes. Okay, let me go back a little bit. There's like this TED Talk with I think Andrew Stanton, and he's the guy that directed WALL-E. He wrote WALL-E as well, and he had this really cool talk, and he basically said like every story begins with a promise, and every story begins with, yeah, he essentially says every story begins with a promise that I will take you, that this is going to be worth your time, right? I hope I'm not getting confused with Charlie Kaufman now that I think about it. But regardless, one of two really talented storytellers say that like this is I'm giving you a promise that this story is going to be worth your time. But on that promise, you're following these particular characters, and it just like I'm starting to ramble, but essentially by adding all these details that don't matter, the story becomes bloated. It's not, but it's more than like, oh, that part shouldn't have needed to be there, but that's okay, because you're also losing momentum, and you're also taking up time that could be going to something that actually pertains to your story. And so it's more than like, if you're adding, like, oh, the film gets +5 better by this scene, +10 for this one. It's not like, oh, this scene doesn't help, it's a +0. It's like for me, it's like a -5, -10, because you are taken away from that story, right? And that's why like something like Whiplash works so well, and we love it so much, because everything that is there is meant to be there. It is doing its absolute best to tell a very clear story, right? And the reason I keep talking about having a story being clear is because the more clear it is, the more likely someone will be able to emotionally become attached to it or invest in it. Because if we get confused with the story, we just can't. Or like it becomes like, well, if I don't, like, I'm not sure if, like on a very grandiose example, like I don't know if Mark is happy about his brother finding John or not, and then those two having a good relationship. If like, not that this is even remotely happens in the story, but if that were like something like that happened, then we're no longer being like, I feel happy or sad about the story, or I feel about these characters. It's, wait, what is happening? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, yeah, like the really long roundabout way that we probably spent like 20 minutes talking about is that for
30.
30? Holy crap. We should keep going. But anyways, yeah, it's just the story clarity matters, and that's why I'm pounding this pounding this film, and I'm saying that that's why this is a film that's a B instead of like an A, is because it harmed its own story clarity, and it didn't pick something to focus on, and it didn't get the full potential out of it. And just because it's a true story,
giving a log line is difficult. When you need to give a log line for Whiplash, it's we follow a student who led to push his boundaries.
Yeah.
When you try and give a one for this,
It's a little more difficult, and it's long, right? And like that's I guess it takes more effort to simplify things clearly, because when I talk, like, I can't do it, right? But it takes more effort to make something a condensed, strong 1 minute scene than having 10 minutes of just like, bits and pieces, right? And that's what I'm saying. In order for a film to be good, and what Foxcatcher did not do is condense things, and to find like to bring it back to more to the actual film. You mentioned to me off the air that you felt like there weren't enough intimate moments between Mark and Steve Carell, right? Or John DuPont rather. And if we were going to be given the story of like its relationship between these two guys, then we would need that more often, and then we become more emotionally invested in the story. But because we don't have it, it just becomes...
Well, maybe they didn't have them really. Maybe they were trying to show that they're... Because there was a lot of shots of DuPont alone, and there was a lot of shots of Channing Tatum alone.
Yeah.
They were kind of just trying to show that separation and feeling of like, I want to be with, with Channing Tatum wanting to be around DuPont, but not being able to because DuPont was so distant. But then those couple moments that we do have with both of them, where they're doing coke in the helicopter, which was like another scene of, I don't know if that's just a bad scene or just uncomfortable.
Well, and like the thing is,
I really can't tell.
See,
I did not enjoy sitting there.
Yeah.
I didn't like the whole like repetition of anthropologist. Sorry, not anthropologist.
Yeah.
But like, oops. It wasn't to the point where I'm like satisfied that it's happening. It's this like sort of blue ball that I get the whole film.
Well, and like
that's the suspense they're taking me on. That's the tone, and that's what I would like to spend time talking about in a complimentary way.
See,
that was well done through the cinematography. And the silences that you were speaking of.
Yeah, well, the thing I was just at risk of going back to that thing that we pounded the living shit out of for like 30 minutes is I feel like that scene, we're not really sure if like how that tells a story more clearly, and like we're kind of a little bit confused about having like the cocaine and stuff like that, because like also I couldn't tell you if this story is I couldn't really tell you if this story is about the love relationship between Mark and Steve Carell, or if it's about Mark trying to overcome his brother's shadow, and or if it's about John DuPont trying to find a friend. And you know what, really, the answer is kind of all of them, and that's fine. But then you have a 2.5-hour movie, and nothing's as developed and profound and satisfying as it should be. Should might be the strong word there, but it could be, right? And that's what I'm saying, is everything is more shallow than it needed to be, right? And I feel like it should have been the director's responsibility to really go
deep.
Like just pick like what is the thing that draws you to this story about these two brothers, because like the story itself is very, very sad, it's very interesting, but on a film you also have to remember, okay, you want to know it's a true story, or you want to remember it's a true story, that's fine, but you also have to remember you're on a film, you're on a medium that is very timely. You have to be quick about it. You can't, or you risk losing people, especially in our time where it's just like people just don't have the patience for it, right? And not only that, but like when you take time on things,
well, reward people for having patience. Reward the ones that are sitting there and listening, and that's what this did. This, through those long silences and through the like massive exterior shots just following a car through John DuPont's residence. You're giving a reward.
Were you satisfied with those? Or I'm sure that you probably were satisfied with like the moments that got there. But my question to you is like, do you think you still would have gotten that same emotional punch if the shot before it was 3 seconds long instead of 25. And my argument is probably. And because we have a lot of evidence, one film,
Yeah, probably
Whiplash,
more punch.
to be honest, because we're not waiting around picking our nose, right? And like when people are saying like the film was so gripping, you know what's gripping? Because we're trying to keep up, right? One of the reasons I fucking loved Birdman is because the first 25 minutes, I felt like I was running a marathon.
Yeah,
I'm in my
totally.
fucking seat watching a film, and I felt like I was physically out of breath, and it was just slow enough that I could keep up, and then I had enough information. But with this film, I felt I was like trying to drag this fat like pit bull or something along with me, and it was just like, sure, it had really interesting moments, but we would have, I really believe we would have gotten 90% of those moments without the 15-minute long silence. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic, obviously, and like there's a shot in the trailer where John DuPont asks him like, what do you want to be, Mark? And he goes like, I want to be the best in the world. And he goes, good. And he breathes, and he has that like weird, almost like Darth Vader breath. And then it cuts. That moment, it still works for me, right? It's silence, but there's something happening, right? I see that John DuPont, there's things going in his brain where he's saying, great, I know that I can get a hook in this guy. I can see it, right? That's all I needed. I don't need another 10 seconds after that shot to realize to have that same effect, right? And it's yeah. No, Noah's popular. He keeps getting a few phone calls.
Sorry, we on silent.
Yeah, but yeah, like and that's, I guess, what I'm saying is I know you're saying, reward people with patience and stuff. You want to reward people with patience. See, like even like with films like The Dark Knight that are, I think, like 2.5 hours long, it's still, there's always something going on, and it's a longer film, but it still is gripping. It's still, things are happening. It doesn't have to be 90 minutes, but it has to. The instant people go, how long is this film? For me, you've missed something pace wise, right? It should always be something, and like when there's a gun in the wrestling room, there's silence. He doesn't talk right away, right? He goes, no, hey, Mark, come over here. And the shots are long and whatnot. It still works because something is happening, and you're afraid that he's going to snap, he's going to shoot something, whatever, right? And you can have those silences. So I'm saying is like, and it does it in this film. They do that well in some parts, but with like certain conversations, it's just like they repeat it over and over and over again, like, which ironically I'm doing with my points, so don't worry, it's not lost on me. But like, it says, Mark, is everything okay? Mark, is everything okay? Mark, is everything okay? Show me a different way, or show me something else, a visual image, whatever, of how he's feeling, or something like that. But don't just have me see two characters say the same things over and over again, right? And if you think, oh, I don't have anything else and I don't know any other way to show it, then move on to your next point, right? Anyways, I've talked so much, and like, dude, I didn't realize I was sort of passionate about that particular part, but I felt like that this film is sort of guilty on what a lot of films do in terms of not being, they just overstay their welcome.
Sure, it could appear as maybe pretentious.
I don't think that,
but I like when films, this film, like, it tastes. There's a taste to it. And you need to be in the mood for that taste if you're going to watch it. Otherwise, you're just going to spit it out and leave. But, like, sure, Whiplash is like a fiery hot sauce. Where you're... And even Birdman, too. You're there the whole time. But this is something that kind of dips in and out. And I keep saying that, dip. Because... But the slight dips in that we get are very rich in flavor. and that's the reward for patience. And I think it's you I know you, and you fundamentally disagree with this way of filmmaking.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of filmmaking that I love.
Yeah. Well, you're a short film. That's what you've been experimenting with, no?
Yeah, totally.
So let it be known, people, that even when we review movies together, one of us is wrong. Which one? I'm not sure yet, but... Yeah.
I think it's structurally it's changing the structure of film slowly but surely, and this one maybe is doing that. I mean, look at Psycho. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, you killed the protagonist halfway through!" Freaking the hell out.
Well, if you didn't know that, you know it now.
Yeah, spoiler. Look out.
Blame Noah.
Sorry, guys. But that was big. That was big for the time, and it was maybe a different big than this is. Because people were, like, actually enraged, whereas here you're maybe actually bored. But I think it's changing our tolerance for what we're going to watch in a film. Maybe we don't need to be always just blah, 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 entertainment. Like, use the film as maybe a bit more of a meditation instead.
So... And yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility.
And let's talk about... Can I talk about cinematography now?
Yeah.
Because absolutely. I think the cinematography was a great tool for that meditation. One of my colleagues in film school, I've told him this a few times, that his film is a meditation because of these, like, wide, long shots where we get, like, kind of this... We're able to see man in nature, and whether he's isolated from that nature or...
This is your friend's film?
This is my friend's film, and it also applies to Foxcatcher, which I'm going to get to. There are these... It works for Foxcatcher because DuPont lives on this massive plantation. I don't know what state they're in.
Yeah, it mentions it.
Somewhere in the south. But it's not like they're taking advantage of... it's not like, okay, let's cut to exterior John DuPont driving to house. Or they would do that and have it be 3 seconds. Or maybe not, because they like dragging other things out in the film. But I think that through the cinematography, there's these really wide shots that we get a glimpse of DuPont's wealth and DuPont's control over nature, but not himself. Like, we literally get to see in one frame where a battle in the Civil War happened, which was on his property, and there's statues, and memorials, and there in the frame, in the very little bottom, are DuPont and what's their last name? What's Schultz. DuPont and Schultz. Sitting there, sort of engulfed by history, by legacy, by nature overall. So I loved that. I loved this sort of... They weren't, the cinematography was, I believe, in tandem with the tone of the whole film. Maybe some might see it slower, slower tone. Also, very well done with their color choices in colors, these yellows and blues. You kind of forget. You forget when you're watching the film how well each shot is composed. But there was just this, like, uncomfortably old yellow and blue as Steve Carell is uncomfortably old. And we're sort of getting into this area right now in the film where, like, Steve Carell is flopping on the ground like a fish when he's trying to wrestle the another older man. The colors for me in the film felt like a great use of using actual colors to be an addition to a character, and that character would be Steve Carell, in my opinion, because that's the where we spend most of the time. And then Channing Tatum, I think he's kind of more of a red color, because his costume is red, or his uniform, I should say.
I thought he was blue.
He goes red and blue. And it would be interesting to see, now that we mention this, because I think Ruffalo's character is blue. Dave, to see which fights he's in red and which fights he's in blue. And this is getting so into like, but I like doing this, screw you and your story. Yeah. Talk about colors. No, but it's part of analyzing a film, and whether it's director or costumer intention or not, it's part of the fun. It really is. So look at those little subtleties. I also want to comment just on Steve Carell's character in general. I don't think we've ever seen this character before. Not from Steve Carell. Not from anyone in cinema history, of like an impotent, trying to fulfill such a huge role, such big shoes, and failing.
And flailing around like a
little kid. And we're kind of led to believe from the beginning, like, oh boy, John DuPont, like, he's going to be powerful, he's going to whip these guys into shape, and he's going to drive them crazy. But he's actually just like, he's such a failure of a kid. And you totally see that he grew up spoiled, getting everything as what he wanted, trying to outwin his did he have a sister?
I can't remember, but I do know that the horses were
his mother's,
and I think that's what he, because there's that scene where they talk about the trophies and his horses, and he tells him to put them away.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he has something about, and like when his mother dies, he just gets all the horses away. Mm-hmm. So the thing that he struggles against is his mother and horses at the very least.
Yeah. So I really loved seeing. I think my expectations were, it's not what I was expecting from Steve Carell's character, and it was kind of a cool realization of character for me to see such a failure of a man. Who we are led to believe so powerful, and because of his wealth.
Well, I think they do a good job about sort of revealing all that stuff, sort of piece by piece.
Yeah.
And you think, because like the first scene is the one where you think, oh wow, Mark and John, they really hit it off, they want to do all that sort of stuff, and then the very next scene, that they're together, Mark shows up to the house, and he's like, hey, I drove down a day early, is John around?
Mm-hmm.
And then like the maid or whatever is kind of like, who the hell are you?
Yeah. And
then when John and Mark finally meet, there's that sort of awkward tension, and Mark's like, why is there awkward tension? I don't get it. And John's just like, firm bed, strong bed, cool bed. You're like, and all of a sudden, that I thought was a very good sort of image or tell sign of just like this relationship is going to be very complicated, and it's not going to be, there's going to be a validity in Steve Carell's emotional state and sort of interactions with these characters, and
he didn't have authority. I loved his line. His like line for Steve Carell for me was good. Yeah, and it's throughout the film. But every time he'd try and have authority over people would just be like, yeah, we got it, we got it, and then good from Steve Carell, like he has had, and he trying to show the people outside of him and himself like he has had authority this whole time. But the poor dude just can't command. Like, every speech of his, the actual words themselves, you know, could be, they're very cliched, but they could be a very powerful coach's speech. But John DuPont, just like, poor man can't, he's not who he wants to be. And that's an interesting tension to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even if you did a film from his point of view, right, that would still be interesting. Or, like, if you used, I might be eating my words in a minute here, but, like, through other characters watching him, which the film might have done, Paul, but yeah, he's a really interesting character, and although I wasn't surprised, and I kind of had a very strong suspicion before I even knew anything else, and I knew that Steve Carell was in this film, that he would do a good job, because if anyone's seen Little Miss Sunshine, he's really good in that as well, and that's a very serious role, serious in a sort of like not dark comedy, but just a dramedy, is that what they call it? Have you seen that film? Yeah. He does a really good job in it, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I never questioned, like, oh, can he only do Michael Scott? I had a very strong suspicion, just with Channing Tatum. Like, I believe those two are very talented, and then Mark Ruffalo is, you know, Incredible Hulk, so it's...
he's more than Incredible Hulk.
Yeah. Well, like, yeah.
He's very lovable in this.
Oh, he was probably my favorite character.
Yeah. I think he's everyone's favorite character. Because on purpose.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I think that's by design. And I think the reason he's everyone's favorite is because he's the least stupid.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that, like, I wish a lot of films did. And, see, it's just, talking about this film, there's so many awesome parts about this film, like great acting, really interesting character studies in these particular people, but it's just sort of like the execution on some of the elements and like all these different scenes is just, for me, cut it off right at the legs, and it's just so unfortunate, because I feel like if it was just like, if time could fix everything and you gave this film like this script another year, this would be probably one of my favorite films. But it's just got so many things like, that scene kind of works, but like if you put the effort into find a scene, another scene, you could take up 3 scenes that are already there.
All right. We
get it. So it's just, anyways. But it's, I don't know, it's just kind of unfortunate talking about it. The one thing I thought was a little bit strange with Mark Ruffalo's character is that how didn't really have too many faults.
No.
And before I went back onto my train that I just can't get off of.
I don't know what faults he did have.
I was watching that. I was just... And, like, I think that in that capacity, you wouldn't be able to have a film based on his character, because you can't have a protagonist without faults. Otherwise, it's just... There's no tension. There's no stakes, because you don't think anything's ever at fault. Or at risk, sorry. Because you'll just know that he'll always win whatever thing comes his way, right? And like, at least with John DuPont and Mark Schultz, they're both really, like, they both have very strong, like John DuPont's, he has a very clear desire and a ton of money, so you think, oh, maybe he can, do it. Mark Schultz is similar in that capacity. Like, he has a very clear goal, and very clear weaknesses and flaws, and so with that, those guys, you don't know if they are going to make it, and so that's interesting to watch, right? Films are not fun to watch if you know the person's always going to win, or there's never anything at risk or no stakes, right? Like, nothing to lose. So in that sense, I guess then all of a sudden Mark Ruffalo's character, while he's great to watch because he's not going to screw up, because the other two characters do screw up so much, there's no way that you'd be able to have him as protagonist, and he kind of is created into a plot device for the end, where you just basically go like, John, why the fuck would you shoot him? No, right? So it was a little bit. I think it was a really sneakily, well crafted, plot device, which is unfortunate. Because I would much rather him be a character and actually have his own faults. But the last thing I want. Nah. It was just going to bring up the whole time thing again.
Okay.
But I'll say in particular, like, my favorite part of the film was after Mark Schultz loses that match, where it's like where you're trying to get into the Olympics or whatever, and you think he's lost it, and then he goes, he does lose it, sorry, and then he goes into the hotel room, and he just eats food, right, and so he gets angry, so like, okay, you're seeing a character really damaged, all this other stuff, okay, cool, it's always kind of interesting to watch a character like that. My favorite part,
lowest point.
Yeah, like one of the lowest points. My favorite part was that like 4 minute span, where for the first time, the characters were put in a legitimate time crunch. Right? Where all of a sudden, Mark Schultz's character had to lose 12 pounds in like hour and a half, right? Even a little bit before that, when like Mark has to like puke into the toilet and stuff like that, like that was all really interesting stuff. And I feel like that works because there's fucking time constraint, and it's all tight, and like everything in that scene, like there's you can't put shit that doesn't need to be there because they've got an hour and a half, and it needs to feel like they're going somewhere. So I won't go on my diatribe again, but that was my favorite point, or my favorite sort of section of the film, and I feel like that's so just signify the 20-minute, 30-minute talk I had, like thing I had. It proves my point to a certain extent. That, or I just can't appreciate lyrical like,
tone, style.
Yeah, I don't know. I think can have tone with and still have some kind of speed. I love Drive.
Think that speed is a tone. Yeah, no, that's like it's very similar. I would argue. And I hated Drive the first time I saw it. I was like, why the hell are we just sitting in here in the car watching Ryan Gosling chew on a fucking toothpick for 2 minutes?
You know, that's interesting. We need to watch Drive again at some point, and I want to see why I really like Drive. Like, I love Drive, and I feel like it should theoretically have the issues that this film does, and the one I'm hounding it for, but I just think Drive is the bee's knees. Is there anything that you want to bring up before people realize that I'm totally right and you're totally wrong now?
Yeah, I think to beat the dead horse, let's like try and watch films for feeling. Feeling can be evoked in many different ways. Feeling for you, like I know what gives you that those feelings, and it's like it's tight knit, tight woven, high stakes, clean, simple. And I'm not gonna tell you your tastes, but I know that is something you like. And sure, the fact that you're surprised by that you like Drive, I'm actually quite surprised. But and you and I had a long debate about this the other week, but I think
it was like 3 hours long. So this is the condensed version.
It's just as difficult to make a tight woven plot film as to make a film with a taste, with a distinct
I don't like using the word
taste.
I don't think. In fact, I don't even think we should be using the word taste because one, taste is so vague. But like two, like be specific.
Foxcatcher tastes like dust off of a taxidermied animal.
I can understand.
I'm never coming back on this podcast.
Yeah.
You're never inviting me back. I know
it. No, I see what you mean. Like I get that feeling that you're talking about, And maybe it's just because, like, my mind is so naturally concrete. Like, I came from business school and stuff like that, right? Like, that's just sort of where I was always, my brain has always been. But, like, for me, that's, like, it's, I think you're talking about a more deliberate pace, right? Letting things ebb and flow, swell, and stuff like that. And maybe it's just because I hadn't seen too many films that have swept me away, and I have felt like I am profoundly changed by it. Like, I like films. Maybe you know the name of the film that was like about an hour and a half long. It's just like cinematography shots. It's like Baraka or something.
Oh yeah, Samsara.
That's the second one.
Okay.
But I think
the first one called.
Yeah, it's like something with a B.
Yeah.
Like, great, and maybe it's just because my brain, I can't, like, sort of jar out of it. But it's like, if you are going to tell a story, then more than anything, the story, if it needs a slow, deliberate pace, then great. But like 99.99999% of the time, it doesn't. Like, the story needs to come first, right? And most of the time, long shots are just at risk of, alienating people with this particular style, namely you. Like, it's, all those shots are just like self-indulgent, pretty shots. And I think, like, for me as a filmmaker, I'm trying to, like, beat that out of me. Like, first and foremost, the most important thing is the story. And if that, like in Whiplash, like in very little, the very first shot is a long dolly shot watching the main character drum, right? That works because I feel like it tells a story. And I just think more often than not, movies that have long deliberate pace is just a director.
Yeah, but you put words in my mouth. You said pace is taste, and taste is not pace.
I didn't. Sorry. Okay.
Taste is included in story.
Yeah.
Taste is included in pace. Taste is included in sound. Taste is included in when you're going to use sound as an element, and then when you shift and maybe want to use. It's actually impossible to explain. And that's and the best thing to have for a podcast. But that's what I'll finish with. That movies are more mysterious than we know. And not that you know, because I know, like, you love finding mystery in film, and you like finding the magic in film. And we all find it in different places. So the fact that it doesn't necessarily conform to the rules of storytelling as we know them is okay.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think you and I are both trying to find the same thing, where it's like we're both trying to find something that moves us. And yeah, I think we're just taking different routes, I think. Yeah, I think that's mostly it. Cool. Other than that, you talked less about the film itself this time around, probably because Nathan's not here to keep me on point. And Nathan, Noah needs to learn how to smack me around a little bit and get me back on focus. But we did talk a lot about, I think, interesting sort of structure points and what films theoretically should be trying to do, or, the risks of doing such, and the fact that ultimately, yeah, as much as I argue certain points, film ultimately is about taste. And at the end of the day, if any of you other filmmakers out there listening, make the film that affects you the most. Because as you can see, even with just two people, there will always be differing opinions. And so when you try to make a film, if you can't make a film that two people agree with, even on like a number of points, there's no way that you're going to make a film that 10 million people will all agree is fantastic. So you might as well just make a film that makes you happy and hope that you do find that 1 million that think you are the shit. I think that's a pretty decent way to end it. Yeah. Again, thank you for listening to my diatribe and Noah trying to keep me on track.
Nike, I didn't try and keep you on track.
Yeah, next time you should. And Noah always brings some, like, always trying to bring me back and make me realize it's not always just concrete points, and that there should be mystery and taste and all of that sort of things you can't necessarily put words to.
And Paul with his well backed up points about actual structure and pace. And...
It's really, yeah. Alright, guys. Anyways, again, my name's Paul Weston. And
Noah Cohen.
see you guys next time.
Adios.